Hello and welcome to Faith and Honest Conversation. I'm Thomas Rowland and this is James Farron. And we met when we were training as counsellors quite a few years ago now, James.
I can't remember now.
No, a while ago.
A while ago,
yeah. And we're here to talk about our experiences of faith as honestly as we can. And try and make it okay for you to have your experiences, which may be the same or different, whatever they are. So, James, I'm going to hand over to you if that's okay. You said you had something to bring.
I do have something to bring today. So just this last weekend, myself and Jen, my fiance, were babysitting for my nephews. I've got two nephews. They are 7 and 5. Yeah, 7 and 5. So sort of like littleish. Littleish.
Primary school, infant school, probably. Yeah.
And the youngest one's only just started primary school. Actually,
cool.
Just started for September. Cool. So they and their family go to church quite regularly, and they go to the church I used to go to. Which I'm no longer sort of like in attendance of. And on the Sunday, they had kind of a children's service, a children-led service where like the little kids they all do something to kind of like I think in lots of churches it's fairly common. I'm saying that having only been to a handful of churches, but I suspect there's places where they do children's services. So they went on.
So the children were leading the service.
Essentially, yeah. With the guidance of like a responsible adult or an adult.
Yeah. Not uncommon in my experience.
Yes, not uncommon. Yeah. And I had work, so I wasn't able to attend. But Jen went along with them. She's, as I say, she hasn't got a Christian heritage or anything like that. She's very much got her own beliefs and. And doesn't subscribe to Christianity in any way really, but she was more than happy to take them along. It kind of broke up the day quite well for them. Okay. And afterwards, when I got home, we were chatting about it, and I saw my nephews again in the afternoon, and I was asking them, how did it go and so on, and they were talking about stuff. And I was like, wow, that seems like quite heavy topics, and they were talking a lot about like sin and a lot about like how it's all right, and that they've gone through essentially like about 7 or 8 different colors, and each color represented sort of like a path along the salvation story essentially, but it was like broken down into like nuggets. So they got sin and death were black.
It's a lovely nugget to have.
Yes, right, little nugget. A great nugget. And then there was like white was purity, and that's because like I think red was love, and I can't remember. Anyway, Jen was speaking to me a bit about it, and she was like, I did not think that was very good at all. When I asked how the service had gone, and she was like, that was horrendous. It really felt very confusing and very like oppressive. I think was the sort of like sense that she got, because it's a few days ago now. I've kind of like bits of the conversation have drifted away, but really the sense was that she was like, why are these little kids being told that they're wrong, that they're sinful? Like why are they being told that they're going to hell, and the only reason they're not is that Jesus has died for them? And it really struck me, because it's been such a long time since I've been in church. I was like, whoa, yeah, that's so heavy. Why on earth are they being taught that? And I was thinking about it. I sort of like scratching my head for a while, going, I can't get my head around. I know that in my heart, that's not my faith. That's not what I believe any longer. Even if it had been at one time, and even then, I'm fairly certain I moved away from it quickly. But but it was essentially it was the talk of hell and the talk of like sinfulness and this sort of like the fact that we are fully, like, as humans, we're completely fallen and we're completely unsavable, except that God sent his son to die to save us, which I believe, theologically speaking, is called penal substitution, which is so like we're really evil. God can't be near us because we're evil and we're sinful. So somebody has to come in between to die in our place so that God can forgive us. So it's like this has to happen for this to happen, but it can't happen until that happens.
Yeah.
Really, really messy. And actually, just speaking about it, I remember my dad talking to me about that when I was a little kid, and me thinking, oh, wow, you know, I guess we're all screwed then unless we know about it. And it kind of like throws up loads of questions about how can anybody be saved unless they've heard, and it sort of like leads on to evangelism and preaching gospel and so on like that. Like, again, lots and lots of stuff that in my own spirituality and my own faith I've gone like really jarred against me and really sort of like, oh, I don't agree with it and I don't know why it feels wrong and I can't put my finger on, and it feels like there's loads of evidence to back it up, and it feels very like strong arguments and strong sort of like theological basis and biblical basis and all of this sort of stuff, to the point where you're like, well, I guess I'm just a heretic, or I believe that God is evil. And it just gets very confusing. I mean, that's like broad brushstrokes and not really giving it like the nuances that are rather. But it really got me thinking, hearing this again, and it being so fresh, and me being so anti what my nephews had heard, that I so sort of like shocked by what I was hearing, and also sympathetic to Jen's reaction. Like, yeah, this doesn't seem right. This does feel abusive. It does feel like you're kind of like indoctrinating these children to behave in a very, very particular way, and to believe that to carry guilt, essentially. That's what I sort of sense that I get is like, you are wrong, or shame, maybe, like from the counselling point of view, being shown, you're like, we're all created wrong, or created perfect and then have fallen, so we're all fallen, and there's nothing you can do about it, but Jesus has sorted it out, so we have to be grateful to him and give thanks to him, and that means that we can have a relationship with God, who was the one we've fallen out with in the past already, but we don't know how we fell out with him, because you're 5. So there's a lot of like stuff in there that I was just like, oh man, that's so yeah, it's messy. It's really, really messy. So I started looking into it. I looked into penal substitution, and I was thinking, why do I disagree with this so wholeheartedly? Well, those are the sort of like the main reasons. And it's also, it doesn't reflect the God I know, who when I met, and my experience of and my understanding of the God that I know is that they're loving and generous and forgiving and compassionate and kind and welcoming regardless. They don't need us to be clean, because we become clean by being in their presence. We are, we're not made sinful. I don't believe that. I don't know. Like, that's not my interpretation of like, say, the creation story. Sorry, or of how we are. I just, and it really challenged me, and I kind of ended up going down a bit of a rabbit hole on Wikipedia, trying to find out, okay, so what's the alternative to penal substitute? Is there an alternative to it? And reading it and reading about it, and people who've like disagreed with it in the past, and that like where it came from, and there's sort of very much got its roots in the Reformation and the early Protestant movements, and then like it becomes quite you can see the links then to, say, like a a capitalist movement of Christianity, where it's like strong work ethic. If you work hard and you do good, then God loves you, because like, you know, that's how you don't sin, and you don't want to add to Jesus's suffering and all of this, which again felt really weird to me when I was taught that. I'm going somewhere, don't worry. So where I ended was I was looking at like alternatives to it, and like alternative theology and different theology that doesn't sort of condone or doesn't profess penal substitution as its sort of like major tenet, and came across universalism, which in the past I've always like gone, oh yeah, I'm a universalist, and the belief is that that ultimately everybody will be saved, and that everybody is loved by God, and that he's got good plan for every single person, whatever that looks like, and we don't necessarily understand that, and that might not be in this life, it might be in the next, however it works out. And for me, like from a faith perspective, I was like, oh, that's so much easier for me to handle, and so much easier for me to get my head around, and to see how the Bible backs that up, or the you know, the not the Bible, but like aspects of the Bible and the way you can interpret the Bible to back that up. So anyway, that's where I'm at. I don't know if you've got like thoughts to weigh in, or if that's been something that you've struggled with in the past, or still struggle with, maybe. I don't know. Don't struggle with, maybe not.
No, I definitely have my own story around it, I guess. Yeah, so I what really hit me when you were speaking was memory I have of having so COVID, we just before COVID, or perhaps in reality as COVID was arriving, but just before lockdown anyway, we moved, and which meant during the COVID time we were kind of looking for churches. And I had a really strong reaction to some churches, a strong negative reaction to some churches, and a much more feeling at ease or something along that lines with the church that we're now at. We now attend, and the strong reaction I had of other churches, and I can think of particularly one, was around this idea that it felt like the vague underlying tone was, you're not good enough, you're guilty, and you should be doing more. But it was very unspecific what that was.
Like a nebulous idea of that.
Yeah. And also ingrained in that is that you can never do enough.
Yes, yeah. You strive, and you never reach that goal.
But you should strive and strive and strive. Like, you've got to strive and strive and strive, but you'll never be good enough, and you're guilty, and you should be really thankful that Jesus died for you. But don't feel too much about the thankfulness. Well, you should do, but you should feel guilt.
It's more about like you should feel guilty about this.
Yeah. Now, at the time, my eldest was 2. And I remember going around in my head was, what sort of church do I want to be taking him to? And then things started opening. We went to this the church that we're now at, and I met with the vicar there, and I ended up crying in his office. Like, it was the first time we'd met, really. And it was something about that, the fear of putting my son through something that would be wrenching him apart. And so that's what was part of going on for me when you were talking about the children's service and things. And this will be quite a provocative term and things, but if we think of trauma as something that is like too much for us to be able to feel and process in a sort of thought and feeling way together, I wonder how much that can be traumatic. That just because and I think churches do it with very good intentions, that this is what seems to be true for us, and we want to teach them. But and this may be where I don't know how much we diverge. We might diverge in that I'm hesitant to land on any position, but I think in as much as it is true, it is vastly like it's millennia of accumulated creed that's been thought about, has historical roots, and has real personal experience that we're trying to put into words, and real nuance as a result, and about the human experience and condition, that I just think, in as much as it is true, it's gonna be way beyond a child. So how much is it going to be detrimental to teach them?
That's it. And what is good to teach a child, and what is good to teach a child about. Essentially what church does, and in a big way, particularly with things like Sunday school or like kids groups and that sort of stuff, is you're helping people create an understanding and a worldview, and depending on how robust that is and how safe you feel within that worldview will completely determines how you're going to be for the rest of your life, in a big way. Like, for myself, like I was writing about this morning. It's I carry guilt and shame from a very, very young age, that I mean partly is attributed to church and to church upbringing, and you just think, well, fairly certain the whole point of like God coming and like the forgiveness aspect and the salvation aspect is ridding us of guilt and shame, not adding to it, and not piling it on us. So something that creates a sort of an environment where we're feeling more of that, or taking on more of that, it just feels abusive. It feels very dangerous. And I suppose that's partly what you were feeling with regards to when you went to the church with your son, and you were like, oh, this is maybe not what I wanted to be exposed to right now.
And for me, it's also about somehow separating that child from themselves. Like I'm very conscious that a lot of what I'm trying to do with Sam is to make him feel happy about who he is, how he is, safe in the world, and confident, I guess. And this idea of sin, an original sin, or that we deserve punishment, just seems to rip him in two. That there's this dark part of him, or this
Yeah.
bad part of him, which is quite mysterious, and like we
Yeah.
don't really like we don't really have a concept of this is it.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. What do you put your finger on? You know,
yeah,
we all have the ability to be bad, and we
yeah,
all have the ability to be good.
yeah,
But
yeah, yeah, exactly, and also, yeah, and I guess you start filling that up. Like I
Mm,
guess I started filling that up with, oh, it's when I'm being disobedient, or
mm,
it's when I'm being um uh feeling angry, or
mm.
later on it's these sexual impulses that I'm
Mm.
feeling, like that gets somehow lodged in all that dark
Yeah,
part of me.
because it's
um
all sort of connected to shame or to guilt or I shouldn't or I, why
yeah,
am I like this and that sort of stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. um and then I think, I mean, this is quite a maybe therapeutic way. I say therapeutic, um therapy theory informed way of,
Mm.
or viewpoint
Yeah.
perspective, but my feeling is, um or my viewpoint now is that there aren't any parts of us that are inherently bad, um like anger, sexuality,
Mm.
um and disobedience,
Yeah. Yeah.
framed as can be
It's the
framed in many
brain
different
difference.
ways.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
um and um and um and if we cut, so this is where I think about cutting salmon too. If we're cut off from
Mm.
those because we think they're evil, and we shouldn't do that because we've got to try and flee from sin, although we can never
Yeah.
be quite good enough anyway, they'll always be there. um like the more we cut ourselves off from those, the more, um just the more life sucks.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like it's gonna trip us up in many
Yeah.
ways, but it's just not a nice way to be.
Yes. But
um
you're sort of like, yeah, as you say, you're dividing somebody into like a bad part and a good part, or an
yeah,
acceptable part and an unacceptable part.
yeah,
And like we looked at, was the book called Self, with the Internal Family Systems book. It was like like a comic,
hmm,
not comic, but like a picture book.
yeah,
And it had this big blob that was the self, and then
yeah,
bits that get hurt, and then they get siphoned or sectioned off.
yeah,
And yeah,
yeah,
it's exactly like that, isn't it? That
yeah,
and that's why, yeah, I think why therapy is so helpful, and particularly counselling is so helpful, because it helps to give us a framework of where the damage ends up, because it's not visible. When with psychological spiritual abuse isn't visible, it's held within the person, it's held internally.
mm, mm,
Um,
mm.
I mean, sometimes it manifests visibly, with various things.
Yeah,
But that's yeah, that's it, isn't it? And I guess it's what I ended up writing about this morning was, it actually really leads into that, funnily enough, because I was looking at the day before, how I'm constantly battling with myself. I'm constantly trying to do something, and I hold myself back, or I want to do this, but I don't do it, and I do that instead. And it's like this real, like, sense of guilt because I'm not doing the things I want to do and that are helping me. And they sort of constantly feel like I'm fighting against me. And then writing this morning about how, actually it's much more about a different approach, about embracing myself and loving even that part that's trying to stop me. Needs love, and it needs attention, and I need to nurture it and see what it wants and see what it's trying to say, rather than fight it. That doesn't lead anywhere. The fighting yourself side of things. So
yeah. And I guess it does, this idea of a sinful part of us
mm,
does lead into fighting that part.
yeah,
And there's a lot of biblical metaphors and language around that as well.
Yeah.
And two ideas came to me. One was this idea that if there's a part of us we shut off, that it will end up tripping us up, like what we can put into that sinful part of us, like what we can fill that not quite named bit. What am I saying? Because the sinful nature isn't really defined, especially early on, like this is it or that is it, or it's we fill it with stuff that, like actions that seem to be, or impulses that seem
that we think, or we've been taught,
that we think, or we've been taught.
Or when we hear other people say, "Oh, I shouldn't do that," you're like, "Oh, that must be sinful. Put it in that box."
Yeah,
that's
it. And that could be from parents, it could be from teachers. It's when we've got that worldview, it's like that's the sinful box. Like that, everything that's in that sinful box is going to be tripping us up. So when we try and do something, that could be keeping us back.
It's there.
Like something that's there that wants to be expressed. And I also think there's something about being caught in a cycle of never being enough. So like if our basic worldview is I'm not good enough, somebody needs to rescue me, I can't do this on my own, and I should try, but I can never be enough. Like if that's our basic way of being in the world, that's kind of ingrained in us, then we're going to replicate that.
We'll keep we will keep trying harder and not succeeding, or not reaching whatever goal, whatever standard it is. The goal is always going to be that much further away from us than we'll ever reach.
Like we'll keep finding ourselves in patterns that is the same, like working really hard, trying our best but failing.
And essentially just digging ourselves deeper, because it becomes more and more.
And there's something that feels very reassuring about that, because I'm a failure again, and that's somehow a good place to be in Christianity, because you're recognizing your sin.
I can't remember what it is, but somebody said about you see yourself as a worm, or you see yourself as completely like wretched. And I think there's a big part of me that just fights against that as well. Like I think of every single human as we're carriers of the divine. We're vessels for God. So and as a result, that makes us beautiful. You've got you're carrying something incredible. So you've got purpose, you've got meaning, you've got significance and worth and value, because you're carrying something beautiful. And that beautiful thing wouldn't be there if you weren't. It would be somewhere else. So I'm cupping my hands at the moment. I'm just sort of thinking like a Super Bowl, for example, like the most incredible, wonderful soup in the world. You're not spending hours going, wow, what a wonderful bowl. But you wouldn't have the soup there if the bowl wasn't. It's providing a service, providing a reason for the soup to be where it is. So and we go around life and probably quite obliviously most of the time, and certainly for me it's oblivious most of the time, oblivious to the fact that we're carrying the divine, and we're carrying like beauty and goodness and joy and hope and love within us, and that is in every single one of us, and we're all carrying it. Just some of us are much more aware of it than others, and so like the sense that like poking holes in the bowl from an early stage makes it much less effective. And why would you do that? Why would you crush somebody and before they, you know, when they're so new and they're so young and they're so like perfect at carrying that, and you really do see that joy in children and that exuberance and joy of creation and being part of a wider world and this incredible imagination that children have. So I don't know really where I was going with that, but yeah, I think essentially where what I'm saying is I just don't think that we're flawed in that sense that we can be taught we are in church scenarios.
I think yeah, and that feels a real profound part of your experience of faith and spirituality and God, that
massively.
there is something of the divine in each of us. And it strikes me that that's the inherent dignity of all people is a very Christian, historically Christian idea as well. Like Imago Dei, in the divine image, and it has been, you know, has also arguably transformed cultures and is behind a lot of the human rights and equality stuff, that we all have dignity, we all have the image of God.
And if you see each person like that, that's what makes each person completely and utterly valuable and worthy of your respect and love, because you suddenly go, oh, I like when you. So it's more than just going, oh well, they're like me. It's like no, like, but I might not like me. But if you know that God loves you and know that you're treasured, and know that you're valuable and adored and like nurtured by this incredible being that is so far beyond our understanding, and that's not just true for you, but it's true for everybody else around you, you're like, oh, hang on a second, this means something much more. It becomes a much bigger thing and a much more widespread. It's not just that I am favored, it's that you are favored, and that as a result I can favor you and I can treasure you and love you, and you know, it can move on. It doesn't stop with the one person. But I think it's absolutely foundational of my faith, and I forget it a lot, but actually it's probably the most basic foundation of what I believe.
And that really links with, and I guess I'm thinking of Genesis 1, and God saw all that he made and it was very good, or it was good. Like, where is the very goodness in us? And that was pre-fall, whatever we mean by fall, like, and that's still got to be there. Like, there's still, it's so that's going on in me, and I think you were talking about kids and how they're very, like, just in the world and spontaneous and joyful, and it reminded me of I was reading Carl Rogers earlier, and the process of therapy going from rigidity to fluidness, and kind of he was kind of saying sometimes you think of therapy as you move from one state through a process into another better state, but actually it's going from a state sort of way of rigid state way of being to a more fluid process way of being.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where he had this great phrase. I'm going to misquote him, but it's
Hmm.
it's like the last bit where it's kind of moving to an integrated being of changingness, which I really liked. But you kind of, I think you do see that in young children, that they're
Yeah.
just so adaptable and changing, but
Yeah.
in response to what's going on within and what's going on without, because they're so
Yeah.
in touch with it, like
Yeah.
they're so
Yeah.
integrated. And I guess all that is coming into my head when I think of dividing Sam up and splitting Sam, like how we rigidify things in that splitting, and so he's not so free to respond to how he is. And for me, that takes me back to the original goodness of creation, that all parts of me, all parts of my organism, in all the systems that are going on, are good.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yes, they can be used in what we could be described as evil. And yet there's something really good about them. I guess I want to float an idea past you of I guess this is where I'm at now. My theology is always changing, and I'm always probably going in circles.
That's
but
right.
I forget what I've been through before sometimes. So maybe I'm just in the same place I was 10 years ago. I don't know. But if we go to a fundamental view of the world as relational, which I think fits in with the Christian kind of triune God. The trilogy, the Trinity.
Of the second one.
Yeah.
I try not to derail it. Carry on.
Yeah, no, I love it. Like, what does that mean for our concept of sin? For me, I think it means sin is a rupture in relationship.
Yes. Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah.
Which means original sin, or this idea of we are born sinful, is there's something about the way everybody finds themselves, which is in a ruptured relationship. Now, that's traditionally put as to God.
Yeah.
But it's in a very sort of non-experiential way.
Yeah.
Like it's just, like this is fact.
Yeah, yeah.
Like
you've done nothing to get to this point, but that is the case. You know, you're born and then like, no, God is separate from you. You're like, oh yeah, but why then? Yeah.
I guess I wonder if we can if it's right to reframe that as something much more experiential, that is what I've been talking about a lot about, is this a rupture in my relationship to myself and all the different systems that are going on in me, and those emotions and those like sexuality, anger, the stuff I put in the sin box. And then also ruptured relationships with other people. And I think I'd go into like ruptured relationship with the earth, with and God being in that. But that's being a very, very experiential rather than this is the fact.
Yeah.
And
well,
then
okay, carry on. Sorry, I'll just
well, I was just going to say, then the cross becomes somehow healing of that.
Yeah.
Reconciling. Now, how I haven't quite worked out exactly.
No.
But mm, yeah, that there's many stuff going on in my head at this moment. Could probably take through 1,000 different ways.
Yeah.
But I think I feel quite happy to land for myself at the moment as a concept of sin, including I'm not able to be at one with what's going with me, with my being.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that means I'm not able to relate to other people honestly, authentically,
Yeah. Fully.
fully. Yeah.
Yeah. Because if you're not like completely harmonious internally, you can't
Yeah.
be completely harmonious
Yeah.
externally. I suppose. Yeah. Yeah. I can relate to that. I like that. And that does actually fit for me with like a concept of sin, which is like to do with a breaking or a, you know, it's something that's damaged or ruptured a relationship. And then when you think about things like violence and lies um, uh, and sort of like relationship, like sort of sexual partners, if they cheat on one another, how all of these things, breaks in trust and that sort of stuff. All of that you can see. Oh yeah, that all makes sense. That all kind of fits in that pattern.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess that broken trust resonates for how I feel with churches and my son. It's
Yeah.
like, yeah, I don't know. That might be a slight tangent, but how much I've trusted churches, maybe historic in my past,
Yeah.
and you could really break that trust.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think with like you'll go to a church and like you'll hear a sermon preached and you think, oh yeah, this seems great, and then like all of the kids will go off to do Sunday school or whatever it is they do, and you don't actually know, are they being taught something similar, something vastly different? What is going on there? And yeah, I think it always comes down to the same sort of thing for me. I like a real reservation with how much I trust any institution.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
I think the other side of this for me is I've been reading a bit of Paul recently, and there are times when I'm like, yes, Paul, like you get it. This is what I'm saying. Like, his concept of, for me, his concept of Christ in the people, people, is so profound. That that and then he has passages like beating my body into submission, or I forget what it is I've read recently, but around this sinful nature. And I find it very hard to go with him. I do like, oh, Paul,
you're like, oh, I don't know what you're talking about here. Or this is very alien. Yeah.
You were supposed to be on my side.
Yeah. We got really close, really aligned.
I know.
Yeah.
And I think I think for me, where I'm coming to in that is, Paul's another person.
Yeah.
And he's going to be different. He's going to be coming from another place.
And he's human.
Pardon?
And he's human.
And he's and he's human.
So he might have got some things wrong.
That's not where I go to, James.
No,
I'm not quite there yet.
It's a very, very controversial point. Probably heretical. Sure, we'll go with it. But he might have done. But it's a too much. Too big a leap. Yeah, too big a
I think for me, it's encountering like that there is an otherness that I'm not quite ready to get hold of as well. And like I can really see the dangers of it, and I will talk about them. I will raise them, but I'm not ready to say that's complete rubbish. I think, and I think for me, I remember when I have a vague recollection of this when I thought about sin and it's time. I've just seen that. Edit that right out. But when I've thought about like sin and hell and things before, like I've kind of framed it as another part of our experience as humans is the evil that happens. And that we want some sort of consequence or some sort of justice maybe for that. And so maybe that's what this part of our theology is trying to deal with. Without making it, I guess in therapy circles there can be a tendency to say it's just environment, or it's not really their fault, or it's
there is a tendency to make allowance for negativity. Whereas but no.
And I think there's a part of me in my experience of like, no, I want recompense, I want judgment. And I want, like, we can't hide the evil behind explaining it. So I don't know if there's something there going on as well that
I haven't explored that so much. I think I have got a bit of, well, I know the answer that I kind of fall out on, but maybe we should talk about it next time, because I think it will spiral out into another long discussion, which would be good. But
great.
We are at time, as you said.
Great. Cool. Thank you, James.
Thank you.
I'm really glad we went there.
Some deep stuff we uncovered, I think.
And I think it really gets to a point as where a lot of people struggle with theology or creed or dogma and their personal experience of God and their faith and church as well, like all those experiences. I think a lot come down to this fear of sin, or this sinful thought, or fear of hell, or something. Great. Well, thank you for joining us, everyone, and we'll see you again next time.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, James. Bye.